Welcome to WhiskyCast, cask-strength conversation featuring news and interviews from the world of whiskey. I'm Mark Gillespie. This is episode number 977 for November 6th, 2022. Coming up in a few minutes.
People farther up the food chain than me thought it would be a good idea to see if we could have a relationship where I was endorsing the product. And, you know, it's like somebody asking you if you wouldn't mind doing commercials for, like, getting a massage. You know, it was just a ridiculous piece of good fortune. It was legitimately, like, my favorite luxury beverage.
That's Lagavulin's number one fan, actor Nick Offerman. The third release in his Offerman Edition series of Lagavulin whiskeys is out now, and he'll join us on this week's WhiskyCast In-Depth. Talk whiskey in general, is working with the legendary Iain Pinky McArthur, and much more. I'll also have the What I'm Tasting This Week department, your voice, and on Behind the Label, a man who's worked in brewing and distilling on 6 continents so far. It's all ahead on our 17th anniversary edition of WhiskyCast.
Gabriel Cardarella here with Dewar's Whiskey, inviting you to enjoy this episode of WhiskyCast with a glass of Dewar's, the most awarded blended Scotch whiskey in history.
And now, a message from Robin Redbreast.
A thoughtful gift is hard work. What you need is a go-to multi-purpose gift for all occasions. A bottle of Redbreast can say, "Enjoy every minute, they grow up so fast." Oh. And equally nails, "Apologies for the back pain, I should have just hired a moving company."
Proud sponsor of WhiskyCast. Redbreast. Pass it on.
Let's get started with the news. It's brought to you by the Dalmore. 2 big acquisitions in the U.S. distilling industry this week. Campari purchased 70% of Kentucky's Wilderness Trail distillery for $420 million, with an agreement to purchase the remaining 30% from founders Shane Baker and Pat Heist in 2031. Baker and Heist will remain in charge at the distillery, and it'll continue to be operated separately from Campari's Wild Turkey distillery. Baker told me in an email that, and quoting now, "We needed a stronger path to global distribution, as well as more expertise on sales and marketing on the global scale. We looked at ways to create that ourselves as we had for some many years, but we realized that it's better to go for half the watermelon than holding on to 100% of the grape." Meanwhile, Diageo has acquired Texas's Balcones distilling for an undisclosed amount. The deal gives Diageo a complement to its Bulleit bourbon brand, as well as its first exposure to the American single malt market. Head distiller Jared Himstedt told me in an email that he and the entire Balcones team are staying on. As he put it, "I ain't going anywhere." Forgot to mention this last time around, but Widow Jane Master distiller Lisa Wicker is going somewhere. She's leaving the distillery after 5.5 years to return to Kentucky full-time for an as-yet unannounced opportunity. She'd been splitting her time between Bardstown and Brooklyn. In other news, last year's collaboration between Diageo's George Dickel Tennessee whiskey and Leopold Brothers in Denver on a rye whiskey was so successful that they're running it back again this year. Dickel's Nicole Austin told me the other night at Whiskey Fest New York that if she's done her job right, there won't be any difference between last year's version and this year's.
It feels incredible. You know, you never know with these new things that are really different how people are going to take it. The reception was so positive. It felt so good. And I think gave us the confidence to make a longer-term plan. So now we're going to work together. We're going to keep it coming. That's the plan.
The George Dickel Leopold Brothers collaboration rye will be available in select U.S. markets starting this month. It'll carry a recommended retail price of $109.99 a bottle. Another whiskey is making a comeback. Compass Box is bringing back Flaming Heart for a 7th edition. The original made its debut in 2006, and Compass Box founder John Glazer describes it as bringing the band back together for a new album.
The blend is more, I would say, I describe it as being more layered. There's a few more components than we've typically used in years past. The style is what is classic Flaming Heart, combining smoke and the sweet kind of spice-like characters we get from finishing malt whiskeys and French oak. You get those two components are the essence of Flaming Heart. But just a little twist on it this time.
It's available starting this month in the U.S. and select global markets, along with the Compass Box web shop. No word on pricing. Lefroy is out with the 4th edition in the Iain Hunter series. It celebrates the last member of the founding Johnston family to own and manage the distillery. Iain Hunter was in charge from 1908 to 1944. The whiskey was matured in American oak barrels and finished in first-filled European oak Oloroso sherry casks. It carries a recommended retail price of £1,200 a bottle. That's about $1,355 at current exchange rates. Meanwhile, Beam Suntory is making an investment in the future. The company has purchased approximately 90,000 American white oak seedlings and will distribute them at no charge to groups coordinating reforestation projects in the Appalachians. Ireland's Lambay whiskey has released its first age statement expression. The Castle Prestige Edition, 20 years old, comes from sourced whiskey matured in ex-bourbon barrels and finished in cognac casks. It's bottled at 43% ABV, and only 8,000 bottles will be available at a recommended retail price of €560 each. I received a sample this week, and I'll have tasting notes available soon at the WhiskyCast website. Finally, Tamdhu is out with the second bottling in its Caracas Alba Distinction series. It's matured in sherry-seasoned American oak casks and bottled at 48% ABV. It'll carry a recommended retail price of £67.99 in the UK and will also be available in the USA, Germany, the Netherlands, Asia, and Australia. You can keep up on the latest whiskey news all week long at whiskycast.com and on our social media timelines. The news is brought to you by the Dalmore.
Hello, Richard Patterson here, Master Distiller, Master Blender for the Dalmore. You know, whenever the team and I are in the world sharing our exceptional single malt, we like to keep in touch with Mark Gillespie and the latest news from WhiskyCast.
We're celebrating another anniversary this week. It was back on November 12th, 2005 that the very first episode of WhiskyCast hit the internet. Hard to believe that was 17 years ago. Thank you for listening over the years and helping us become the world's longest-running whiskey podcast series. If you missed our Happy Hour Live webcast the other night with James and Maura Doherty of Ireland's Slieve League Distillers, the on-demand replay is available right now on the WhiskyCast YouTube channel. Join us this Friday night at 5 p.m. New York time on the YouTube channel, our Facebook page, Twitter, or Twitch. Time now for the WhiskyCast calendar of events brought to you by Catoctin Creek Distilling. McTeers has its next auction of rare whiskeys this Friday in Glasgow, Scotland. Bourbon and Barbecue is this weekend in Louisville, Kentucky. I'll be in Fredericton, New Brunswick next week for the New Brunswick Spirits Festival from the 15th through the 19th. Whiskey Live Singapore is on the 19th and 20th. Whiskies of the World is in Seattle on the 19th, along with the Nottingham Whiskey Festival in England. The debut of Whiskey Fest Las Vegas takes place on December 2nd, and Whiskies of the World wraps up the year in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, December 10th. If you have a whiskey event coming up, please let us know about it. We'll be glad to add it to our searchable calendar at whiskycast.com. It's brought to you by Catoctin Creek Distilling, makers of the Virginia Rye Whiskey. You'll find their Roundstone Rye at fine whiskey shops in 26 U.S. states, 3 continents, and online. Visit the new buyvirginiarye.com site for more details, and please drink responsibly.
And now, a message from Robin Redbreast.
Kentucky and Ireland have plenty in common. 2 homes of horse racing. Bluegrass music is said to have Irish roots. Okay, it's not the longest list, but the Redbreast Kentucky Oak Edition only strengthens the bond. Finished in sustainably sourced Kentucky oak for a captivating nose and round taste. I see a triple crown in this thoroughbred's future.
Proud sponsor of WhiskyCast. Redbreast. Pass it on.
WhiskyCast In-Depth is brought to you by Mortlock and the Classic Malts lineup. Nick Offerman has been entertaining audiences for years in movies and television shows like Parks and Recreation, where his character Ron Swanson was arguably Lagavulin whiskey's #1 fan. That led to a real-life relationship between Offerman and Lagavulin that goes on to this day with a series of Tales of Whisky videos. Here's part of the latest one.
In a universe where you didn't think whiskey could get any smokier.
Agent Offerman, your mission is contained in this briefcase.
Damn it, Beth. I told you I'm out of the game.
This is the only all-new limited edition bottle of 11-year-aged charred oak cask whiskey in existence. If we don't get this peaty oaky goodness into production at Lagavulin headquarters by tonight, people won't get to try your new whiskey.
All right, I'm back in the game.
Be vigilant. Mr. Pinky will do everything he can to foil your mission.
Initiate the Lagavulin Protocol.
Thank you for joining us, Nick. First of all, let's explain the collaboration with Lagavulin. How did you first come about enjoying Lagavulin? I know you've told this story a number of times, but we've had listeners that wanted to hear it again.
Well, it's pretty simple and quite uncanny, really, especially in hindsight. I mean, I was never a great connoisseur of any beverages. I was a theater actor in Chicago, and part of your job in the theater is drinking a few pints every night after the show, and it was quite exotic to me. This is in the 90s that I was able to find a pint of Guinness. Like, that was bananas back then, coming from a small town in Illinois. And then on special occasions, I would usually get an Irish whiskey, because the couple of bars that we frequented were like Irish whiskey bars, which was fine. It was effective and rather candy-like, your Jamesons or your Bushmills. So it wasn't until I was 29 years old, a discerning friend of mine, a filmmaker named Scott King, bought me a glass of Lagavulin 16 neat. We were at the Chicago Film Festival introducing our film Treasure Island. And when you do that, then you have the duration of the film to kill that time before you come and answer the audience's questions. So we ducked into the bar at the Water Tower place, and he bought me this scotch, and I, just knocked my socks off. I said, holy cow, I see what all the fuss is about. I've been hearing about scotch for all these years. And little did I know that I was completely spoiled by one of the most magnificent and flavorful profiles when it comes to single malts. And there began my education. I was fascinated to learn things like how to pronounce Islay, and so forth. And so that became my special occasion, my favorite libation. And almost 10 years later, it was on Parks and Recreation. It was in the script that my character pulls a bottle of scotch and a couple glasses out of his desk. And we came to that part of the scene, and I opened the drawer and I said, holy cow, how did they know my favorite scotch was Lagavulin 16? Lagavulin. I've been corrected in the pronunciation. The accent is on the VU, Lagavulin. I said, holy cow, how did this get here? Well, it turns out Mike Schur, the creator of Parks and Recreation, it was also his favorite scotch. And at the time, it was much more obscure. Nobody had heard of Lagavulin in our circles, by and large. And so it was a wonderful coincidence. We share a love of many things, and that was added to the list. And we used it on the show so much that it became a thing. It sort of became a foregone conclusion where we said, have we heard from these people? We're giving them a great deal of free television time. And so a few years into the show, we got in touch with Lagavulin. We thought we were going to be going to shoot a couple episodes in London. because Chris Pratt was there shooting Guardians of the Galaxy. So in order to keep him in the mix, we planned a trip there. But my character hated Europe. And so the solution to explain why he would be there is that he was sent on a treasure hunt to the Lagavulin distillery. So that actually got me all the way to the beautiful little distillery on the little bay on Islay, and we hit it off. We all got along famously, and people farther up the food chain than me thought it would be a good idea to see if we could have a relationship where I was endorsing the product. And, it's like somebody asking you if you wouldn't mind doing commercials for like getting a massage. It was just a ridiculous piece of good fortune. It was legitimately like my favorite luxury beverage. And they said, would you mind, holding up this bottle and giving us a thumbs up? And I said, I would not mind. That sounds good. And so me and a couple of Parks and Rec producers named Morgan Sackett and Dean Holland, we have not, for about 10 years now, I think we just figured out, we just did our 5th or 6th trip to the distillery and to Scotland. And we've shot almost 50 commercials, which can be seen on YouTube on a channel called My Tales of Whisky.
How did you ever convince NBC to let you use a real Scotch in the show?
That's really a great question. I mean, I think probably the way these things usually work is you don't ask. You don't ask for permission. It's better. What's the saying? Like it's better to ask for forgiveness than permission. It's funny. Morgan Sackett, who was our producer, he's also produced The Good Place and Veep. And he got his start on Seinfeld. He does that show Hacks. He's incredible. He's brilliant at knowing how to sort of lubricate the cogs and wheels of the corporate system. So especially making a television show, if you wait for permission from the Standards and Practices Department for everything you want to do that's questionable, your show will be as bland as a loaf of white bread. But Morgan is really good. When we wanted to go to London so we could shoot with Chris Pratt, I think he asked for permission, and they said no, we don't have the budget for that. You're not a hit show. You're not The Office, for Christ's sake. And so Morgan said okay. So he just shaves off money from the crafts from different departments so that by the end of the year, he's saved up enough money for us to go shoot 2 episodes without needing any extra budget. So it's through that kind of brilliant creativity. And I think again, using the real brand of Lagavulin, I think it probably just was beneath their notice, because it's not like it was, Johnny Walker or some huge label. And it's not like we had to pay anything. And as soon as it became an opportunity, I think later on for money to change hands, I think eventually towards the end, Lagavulin kicked in a little bit of budget in exchange for the screen time we were giving them.
It seems only fair after all that free screen time over the years.
It does seem only fair. And that's why, I guess that's why they feel beholden and they keep using me instead of a handsome protagonist in their commercials.
Well, you in your latest commercial have become an action hero. How much fun was it to make this latest commercial?
Well, it was incredibly fun. They always are. One of the great parts of the relationship is the company has the wherewithal not to put their thumb on our creativity with any firmness, and so they let us sort of come up with these comedy ideas that are in the vein of Parks and Rec. There's something stupid about them, but they're charming and enjoyable, usually involving me falling down in some way. And so it's incredibly fun. I mean, I've gotten to a couple years ago, we did a Braveheart commercial where they dressed me up completely like William Wallace and on horseback with all these extras, a screaming army about to go to battle. And I was begging them to tread lightly on the peat. Like, let's go kill the enemy, but let's save the peat because we need it for the whiskey. So they're totally dumb and therefore incredibly fun.
Your background is in woodworking as well as in acting, and I'm curious what you've learned about the whiskey making process over the years of working with Lagavulin that compares to crafting fine furniture and doing fine woodworking. There seems to be some parallels there that I think might be worth exploring.
Sure. I mean, they're both at their best these sort of traditional handcrafted practices and disciplines by which master artisans are taking natural raw materials and through various techniques turning them into something exquisite, whether it's a piece of furniture or a beautiful single malt scotch. The thing that I have enjoyed learning about the most, and I'm still very much a student in this arena, is the alchemy of finishing and achieving an effect on your liquid, whether it's scotch or any of the other libations that are finished in usually oak casks. Sometimes reused oak casks. In this case, heavily, shaved down and heavily recharred used oak. To me, that's fascinating. It's kind of like becoming really good on the grill as well. When you learn about the effects of different wood chips when you're smoking your meats. The different flavors and profiles and nuances that can be imparted upon your liquid. And, that's something that over at Lagavulin, there's a man named Stewart Morrison, he's the wizard who lets me stand at his elbow, I guess, as the sorcerer's apprentice. And I love the education that I get from him about being able to discern not only what kind of effect the casks will have on these liquids, but also how long to let the cookies stay in the oven, as it were. It's been a really fun education. And like the rest of this relationship, every time they tell me, okay, we're going to do it again, and I say, okay, that sounds pretty good to me. I will agree to trying another Offerman expression.
Will there be a fourth Offerman expression? And we did have a question from CD wanting to know about any plans for a cask strength Offerman edition in the future.
Very good questions. Thank you. As far as I know, there is a fourth one in the works. We are, at the moment, we're spitballing about what that might entail. And a couple of the words that have been tossed around are, in fact, strength and cask. So hopefully, yes. I mean, as we take this particular 11-year expression that seems to be in our wheelhouse, it's a funny thing. It's a crazy business to learn about. And again, I'm maybe a sophomore by now, but it depends. When you think about we're making an 11-year, that means that the majority of the whiskey that goes into it has to be available because it has to have been tucked away at least 10 years ago, if not 11. And so we find out how much of that we can get our hands on. We find out what its strengths and weaknesses are, and then how can we tweak it and shape it into what we want it to become. And so with that in mind, as we've done every time, Stewart Stewart will get his head together, and then he'll tell me a little bit of what I think. And the best part is I don't have to take any classes. He just sends me 8 choices, and I get to tell him which one I think is yummy. And then he calls that collaborating.
That sounds like collaboration to me. I mean, the Sorcerer's Apprentice line sounds about perfect.
It is, yeah. It's ridiculous, and sometimes my dad is involved too. So we get us all on a Zoom, and we do these tastings. We have these special. Do you ever see these glasses?
Oh yeah.
This was new to me, and I kept asking Stewart. I know, the color of the liquid is an important part of a tasting. So why would you send him in these blue glasses? And he explained that it's because you don't want the color to sway your palate. If it's a darker or lighter or more golden liquid, you don't want that to sort of tap into any preconceived notions. It allows you to stay blind, as it were, which I really appreciated.
We had a number of questions asking whether you have any other go-to whiskeys besides Lagavulin or other spirits.
There are some single malts that I really love. One is called Redacted, and then there's also you know what? I mean, I feel very lucky. I feel very lucky that I am not incredibly persnickety. Whether it's beer or whiskey, I haven't met a lot of brands that have hurt my feelings. I am also very fond of Oban and Talisker, for whom we've done some commercials as well, and they're also under the Diageo shingle. But and there are some of the other Islay offerings I really enjoy. I mean, it's an incredible time to be alive. If you love anything like craft beer or single malt Scotch or fine grass-fed meats, so it'd be easier to name the ones that I don't like.
What was it like the first time you saw a bottle of the Offerman edition with your picture on it, when they showed you the prototype, or when you first saw it out at a liquor store?
Well, it's interesting. It's strange to be in this relationship because it was already my favorite, and so the sort of canny businessman side of me, which is not a very big part of my pie graph. The businessman says I should be cynical and make sure that they're recompensing me properly for my image and stealing my spirit. And then there's the Lagavulin lover and just the hedonist, the man of the theater. The indulgent side of me says, I can't believe this is happening to me. I am very grateful, and it's really fun. I can't believe it keeps going. And I guess my favorite thing about it, it's kind of like when a show like Parks and Recreation, which has, or The Good Place, which has some wonderfully countercultural sensibilities, or anti-consumerist messaging, perhaps is more succinctly put, when that lands on a massive corporate channel like NBC, for example, or I was in that movie, the Lego Movie, which is a wonderful anti-corporate message in this massive corporate package. It feels really lucky to sort of sneak that particular broccoli into the pizza that we're selling. And so with that in mind, I feel very grateful that this massive beverage company allows me so much input. I get to, we toss around ideas for like the drawings. And so there's one on this new bottle of me in a rowboat, which is kind of a trope, which goes back to me floating around the little bay, playing a guitar and singing a song about whiskey. This time I have a stake on a harpoon, extended over a fire on the beach, because this is formulated to go perfectly with that perfectly grilled steak. But I mean, they send me all of these sample boxes. So I get in the mail all these different versions of the carton with different amounts of char in the charcoal, and then different amounts of sparks, different patterns of sparks, different fonts, different finishes of these inks. Like this time we looked at some that had like a gold foil sensibility, which, as usual with me, it's why I don't wear earrings. It's just a little much. We don't need that much dressing up. And like on the back of the carton is what they call the romance language. I write that entire thing because it's my face on the bottle, and I'm not a cover girl. There's something more to my voice that is representing this product, and so it's very important to me that it is my voice, that it's not somebody creating a superficial sensibility of what might represent me.
So you wrote the lines about the 7 delicious foods.
That's correct. And frankly, I'm over the moon that they kept it. It's one of those things where I'm the class clown in this circumstance, and I'm like, here, this strikes me as funny. It's totally dumb, but it also is passionate, and it's coming from my heart is in the right place, and they really get behind it, and they put it on the box. And I would challenge anyone to go to the liquor store and find any carton that's half as funny as the back of this box is.
Won't happen.
No time soon. I would like to see, and I'm talking out my ass here but I would like to see the romance language that Mr. Clooney has put on the back of his Casamigos tequila products.
Staying within the corporate family, of course.
In fact, yeah. I guess I'm officially calling George out, and this will be the beginning of our feud.
One final question. We had a couple of folks asking about your memories of working with Iain McArthur, the legendary Mr. Pinky.
Well, I mean, he's what a character. From the first time we visited Lagavulin, which, when my character Ron Swanson at the end of a long scavenger hunt is on a boat, and he comes around a corner and sees that the end of the pot of gold at the end of his rainbow is the distillery of his favorite scotch, God's chosen elixir. And Ron gets teary. It was not a hard scene to pull off, because I also was pretty emotionally moved to get to visit. When you become obsessed with something like a single malt scotch, and you look it up and you say Islay, or Islay is how I thought it used to be pronounced, and eventually I learned it's Islay, and you look at where it is, and at that point I had never been to Scotland, let alone a remote island off the coast of Scotland. So you just think, it's like Brigadoon. Like who could ever get to this place? There's one tiny airplane per day that goes in and out depending on the fog, and or you can take a ferry for some hours. And so when we finally got there and were greeted by an incredibly charismatic man, small in stature but enormous in spirit, who's the bon vivant of the Lagavulin distillery. He runs the tours, and he took us down into the basement cask room, and the first thing he did was pull a glass from a barrel from 1967 or 8, unfiltered, and handed it to me. And it had floaters in it. I mean, it was incredible. And I said, "This is astonishing." And I gave it a slight taste, but it was 9 a.m, and I had 12 hours of shooting in front of me. And so one of our, I said, "I can't, thank you, but I can't take this right now." And one of our producers, I set it down, and he quickly disposed of it for me, which I appreciated. But working with Pinky has been just an absolute joy. He's the showman of the Lagavulin experience, and so we always feel very grateful that he takes the time out of his schedule to allow us to get into the distillery and shoot where we need to, and then sometimes he even appears in the scenes with us, and he's really funny.
Has he taken you out to cut peat?
He has a few times, and he's very generous with me. The second time that I did it, I would give myself a B, and then we just did it recently, and his training really showed up, and I think I got up to an A-, and it was the first time that he said that I did a good job. But it's funny that he has this cute old antique peat cutter, which for those that don't know is a sort of angled, it's like an angle iron blade that actually, this has never occurred to me before, but this is kind of the dimensions of a brick of peat. It's maybe a little longer, but if you took two sides of this, that's the blade that cuts down into the mud, and it's tipped up and tossed onto the pile. And so he has this really cute antique one that looks great on film. So they have me doing it, and it's kind of awkward, but I'm achieving it. And then they asked him to pile a few up. They were like, "Let's get ready for this next shot. Pinky, would you pile a few up?" And I handed him the one he was having me use, and he shook his head and pulled out this modern, much nicer one. And I said, "Yeah, I see what's going on here. You set me up."
By the way, Nick's blending tutor, Stewart Morrison, joined us on the show last month. You can hear that interview in episode 974 of WhiskyCast. Single malts need blenders too. And that's also where you'll hear my tasting notes for the Offerman Edition Charred Oak Cask. Thanks again to Nick Offerman for joining us on this week's WhiskyCast In-Depth. It's brought to you by Mortlock, whiskey's best-kept secret. Hidden away for decades in some of the world's most famous Scotch whiskies, comes a single malt inspired by an original for a fortunate few. Discover the entire Mortlock lineup at malts.com. The What I'm Tasting This Week department is brought to you by Sagamore Spirit. Tasted some interesting whiskeys the other night at Whiskey Fest, New York. Let's start with the Glenmorangie American Oak Bourbon Cask. The 15-year-old single malt is bottled at 43% ABV. The nose has the classic Glenmorangie citrusy touch of orange peel, along with grapefruit, a hint of berries, honey, and vanilla. The taste is citrusy, with a hint of cinnamon spice that balances orange peel, honey, and grapefruit notes. The finish is long with a lingering touch of cinnamon and citrusy tartness. I'm scoring the Glenmorangie American Oak Bourbon Cask a 92. India's Rampur whiskey has a new expression out that blends Scotch whiskey with its own locally distilled malt and grain whiskies. Royal Ranthambore is bottled at 40% ABV. The nose is malty with touches of honey, freshly cut grass, dried flowers, and tree fruits. The taste is buttery smooth, with hints of plums, apples, cocoa powder, and just a hint of smoke that carries into the finish, where the smokiness shows off the Scotch whiskey influence. I'm scoring Rampour's Royal Ranthambore a 92. It's always fun to discover new distilleries at festivals, and the folks at Rhode Island's Newport Craft Brewing and Distilling brought their Sea Fog single malt to Whiskey Fest. The whiskeys in this one are 6 to 8 years old, and it's bottled at 45% ABV. The nose has a nice balance of grassiness and briny notes, along with butterscotch, honey, and vanilla. The taste is grassy and vegetal, with touches of lemon zest, butterscotch, honey, and freshly cut grass. The finish, medium length with a touch of lemon pepper spice. I'm scoring the Sea Fog single malt from Newport Craft Brewing and Distilling a 90. This week's tasting notes are brought to you by Sagamore Spirit, a 100-time award-winning Maryland-style rye whiskey. With a determined focus to create the best rye whiskey imaginable, Sagamore's team of distillers crafts each spirit with a nod to both tradition and innovation. Find their signature, Double Oak, Cask Strength, or Reserve series of rye whiskeys, as well as their line of premium rye whiskey canned cocktails, at a retailer near you. Visit sagamorespirit.com/find-rye. Please drink responsibly.
Dewar's master blender Stephanie McLeod's innate curiosity, combined with her passion for whiskey maturation, cask finishing, and blending, has created some truly incredible expressions for Dewar's Scotch whiskey. It's also earned her 4 consecutive Master Blender of the Year titles at the International Whiskey Competition, making her the first person to achieve such an accolade. Her innovative spirit is the inspiration behind the ultra-premium Dewar's Double 32 Year, the highest-rated blended Scotch whiskey in the world with a score of 94.4. So whether you consider yourself a whiskey connoisseur or just want to find an exciting new whiskey experience, consider one of Stephanie's other masterful expressions, including Dewar's 15-year, Double 21-year, or Dewar's 8-year Mizunara cask finish, and discover just how rewarding curiosity can be. Enjoy responsibly.
Let's open up the inbox now for Your Voice, presented by Scarabeus Islay Single Malt Scotch Whiskey. Diageo's purchase of Balcones Distilling this week sparked a lot of conversation on social media. Here's one take from Gavin at Gavin_crypto on Twitter. Quoting now, "Damn Diageo strikes again. I always have mixed feelings when Diageo, Pernod Ricard, or Beam Suntory buy up distilleries. On one hand, the distillery was successful enough for the big corporations to want them. On the other hand, I know this means neutered whiskey at some point in the future." Not necessarily, Gavin. Have some faith in Jared Himstead and his team to keep things interesting in Waco. From our colleagues at the Whiskey Lore podcast, at Whiskey Lore on Twitter, Balcones is a good investment, great reputation, and for a state with a short whiskey history, it puts Texas on the international whiskey map. And finally, from TB at TB_everyday, Balcones Whiskey always has new offerings to keep fans like me hooked. I hope that continues under the new corporate overlords. Please stay weird, Balcones. If you have something you'd like to share with whiskey lovers around the world, you can always find me on social media. Just look for WhiskyCast on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, or you can email me. The address is comments@whiskycast.com. Your Voice is presented by Scarabeus, the Islay single malt from Hunter Lang & Company that celebrates all of Islay's natural gifts in one bottle. Only those who seek shall find Scarabeus. Start your search today at hunterlang.com. Let's close out the show now with Behind the Label, our look at the history, science, and people who make whiskey unique. It's brought to you by Writer's Tears. Some distillers stay in one place for decades, like Jimmy Russell. Others move around a lot, like Darren Peck. He's the master distiller at the Morris Distillery in Rutherglen, Australia, about 3 hours north of Melbourne, and he's worked all over the world, in 6 continents, to be exact.
I was very lucky. I left university in around 1991, and I did a brewing and distilling degree. From there, I moved around the world following my passion. Distilled in America, and then from there I managed to get down to South America. Been in Africa doing beer. I've been in Russia and the Far East doing beer and whiskey. And then eventually somebody offered me a job in Australia, which was the last continent I'd never made alcohol on. So I jumped at the opportunity.
And all that's left now is Antarctica, right?
That's correct. So what I'm hoping is I've got my wife to sort of promise I can go on a Antarctic cruise on my 60th birthday, and I'll take a little home brew kit, and that'll have to count.
What have you learned over the 6 continents so far about making whiskey?
That's a good question. What I found, the main thing is you've got to look at the terroir of where you're making the whiskey. So what are the temperatures in the country? What is the primary crop, what's grown within that country? So whiskey in Australia, we're very lucky. We've got 100% Australian barley. Other spirits I've worked on, we're looking at rums. So you're looking at countries where sugar grain grows. And it's all about looking at the temperature and the way the whiskey will mature, and understanding the spirit you need to make to put into the barrel to ensure that maturation works perfectly.
Thanks to Darren Peck for sharing his story with us this week. If there's something you'd like us to look at on an upcoming episode, just use the contact form at whiskycast.com to get in touch with us. Behind the Label is brought to you by Writer's Tears.
Writer's Tears Copper Pot, an 18th century style of premium Irish whiskey, blended from single pot still and single malt. Like yourself, it's one of life's treasured rarities, and what's rare is wonderful. Writer's Tears Copper Pot.
That's all for this edition of WhiskyCast. You'll find links for the stories in this episode in our show notes at whiskycast.com. That's also where you'll find the latest whiskey news, my tasting notes, the whiskey photo of the week, and, of course, a complete archive of all of our past episodes, going all the way back to that very first one on November 12th, 2005. Get in touch with us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at WhiskyCast. The email address, comments at whiskycast.com.
And now, a Thanksgiving message from Robin Redbreast.
What am I thankful for? Being on the smaller end of the bird scale.
Happy Thanksgiving from Redbreast, proud sponsor of WhiskyCast.
Well, folks, we're nearing the end of another great episode of WhiskyCast, which means you're probably craving some whiskey. Head on over to Dewar's.com or your local retailer to discover what makes Dewar's the most awarded blended Scotch whiskey in the world.
WhiskyCast is a production of Cask Strength Media, copyright 2022, and comes to you from the charming, yet regrettably dry town of Haddonfield, New Jersey. I'm Mark Gillespie, reminding you that when you drink, please drink responsibly. Thanks for listening.